Well, hello everybody. Welcome back to our series about developing games in GameMaker Studio 2. We're going to get straight into it. Today we're looking at user interface. So this is UI user interface. These are your main menus, your win screens, your lose screens. Remember, we're going to be opening up GameMaker Studio 2. You should have the icon on your desktop, or you can search for it in the search bar. We're going to be starting with a completely fresh template. But if you remember last week, we looked at creating an adventure game, moving a player up, down, left and right, and that is still available on the YouTube channel. So if you have a look on the HC Games Development YouTube channel, you'll see the Game Maker playlist where this should be. If you remember, we've got our introduction, and you've also got our introduction to adventure game in Game Maker Studio. The resources for today's activity can be found on the Moodle page, HC Games the Games Development Project, and as you scroll down towards the bottom, Game Maker Studio 2 resources, there is a folder here for buttons. Let's give that a click. That will download a zip to your downloads folder of your machine, exactly like it did last week for those who were here. Give that a click, and we're going to extract that by pressing the Extract All button. Extract it to the same location in your downloads folder and click extract. And now we've got some buttons that we can use. If you're unfamiliar with the way Windows works, if you want to see what these icons look like, change the view of these icons by pressing the view button, and let's go with medium-sized icons. And you can see what they actually look like now. I think large icons might be better, or maybe even extra large to see what they all look like. We're going to pull some of these into our game, and we're going to make them load certain levels when we press them. So in Game Maker Studio 2, we are going to create a new project, which is a new blank project, just by pressing Game and Blank Game. It may ask you whether you want to use Game Maker code or whether you want to use the drag and drop features. We want to use the drag and drop one, which is not the code option. I don't really mind what the game is called, but this is going to be dealing with user interface, so I'm going to call this example UI, short for user interface. Don't really mind too much where we save it, because we can move it later on if we'd like. So our project loads up very, very quickly because there's not a lot to our project, remember. Any project we would create has a starting room, which is just a black background. That's all there is in our project. And we're going to go and add our files that we've just created. So if I go to my downloads folder, I'll find a bunch of obviously stuff that's in there at the moment. But if I go into the buttons folder, which I just extracted, and in there again, you can see all of those images. They are quite well named. That's not me. That came straight from GameMaker 8.1. But what we're going to do is take these and have them be the basis of our sprites. We can click on each one individually. So I'm going to start with the play button and drag that into our sprites folder. You can do this one by one, and it will pop up automatically with the name and any other key information. Or if I undo that quickly, just going to delete that so I can undo it. You may find it a little bit easier to select all of them with a drag select and drag and drop them all as one. Then that will put all of them in your project, and it's far, far quicker. And we can just close that down. So we've now got a series of buttons, and you can see that it puts it within our workspace. They're all there. And we can close that workspace if we wanted to open up individual sprites. We've got a lot of control there. So we've currently got room 1 open, which is going to become our main menu. We want a main menu that's got a play button, it's got a quit button. Maybe you've also got buttons to do things like load your backstory, or maybe you've got other things as well. But for now, we're just going to keep this project really simple. So I'm going to rename room 1 by right clicking and renaming it. And instead of room 1, I'm going to call this menu and then press enter so it will update that. And you can see it's changed the name up here. To make this really, really obvious, all I'm going to also do is change with our menu, which remember is our current room. I'm going to go to the background settings, and I'm going to change the colour of our background to something different. Maybe I'm going to choose dark blue, and then I can kind of pick a colour that I like. Maybe I kind of like this purple. Whatever works for you. Pick a colour that is visibly distinct and different from black. What we can now do is put our start building our main menu. Maybe we're going to have a title appear with the name of our game, but we're definitely going to have a play button and a quit button. I want to show you what not to do. Okay, you're not supposed to grab the sprite and drag that into your scene. It will work, but that's not what we want. We want to have our sprite be the graphic and our objects be the thing that manages our inputs, and we drag our objects into our scene. We don't currently have any objects, so let's go and make one. I'm going to right click on objects and create an object, and this object is going to be called obj underscore. Remember, an underscore is shift and the one next to 0 on your keyboard, the one that does that. So you want shift and that button, that puts an underscore in, a bit like an underline. And this is going to be called play, and I'm just going to call it btn for button. So btn, object play button. Then we can choose the sprite we want to attach, which is in the sprites folder, and in there we've got one which is helpfully called button load. If you can't quite read it, you can see the names down here as well, or you can stretch this to make it a little bit bigger if you need a little bit more space to select things. But I want the load button, so button underscore load. That takes the sprite and attaches it to this object, remember. I'm going to close that workspace down, and now with our new object, which is obj underscore button, we can drag that into our scene and let go. It says that only be placed on a layer. Do you want to create a new layer? Yes. I didn't expect that message, but there it is. And it snaps around aligned with the grid. So we've got quite a bit of control over there. I think I know why it said that. Let me undo that. I think it's because I'd still got background selected. If I choose instances and put the button on there, works absolutely fine. So just make sure you've got instances selected. Background is the properties for the background of your room. Instances means objects, all the objects. That was my fault, I didn't click back on instances, so make sure that you do. We've got our loading button, which we can resize if we want to. We can grab the corner and make it a bit bigger. But remember, we don't really want to stretch something like that, and we don't want to stretch something like that. What's called keeping it in the right aspect ratio. Excuse me. Which means it's always best to grab the corner and try and keep it the right size and shape. Because this isn't a hugely high resolution image, you'll notice that you don't have, if you make it too large, it becomes really quite pixelated. So we don't want it too big. Maybe about there. And if you press the play button in your game, you'll have a load button that doesn't do anything, but at least you can see the game is running, and obviously that won't work until we tell it to do something. So close the game down, back to the editor. Also means you can line things up if they're not perfectly central, and you can see the numbers running along the top. So we can see we're 1350, so we can kind of eyeball half of that if we wanted to get it exactly perfect. So we've got some other properties we want to look at as well. The other thing we want to do with our play button is double click back on the play button object, obj underscore play button, which opens up its rules. We're going to say here, when I click on it using the left mouse, I want to go to a different room. We don't currently have a different room to go to, so let's go and do that before we do anything else. Right clicking on rooms, creating a new room, and this is going to be our main game. So I'm going to call it main game. I want to show you something while we're here. If I were to put a space in, notice that that won't work. It tells me that you cannot have names that include special characters, and space is a special character. So let me try and rename that again, main menu with no space in it. If you do want to make things readable, you can use that underscore I showed you earlier, which can make it a little bit more readable and easy on the eye. I'm not going to do that, but you might want to. We've currently got our main menu, and just to make our main menu stand. Sorry, I didn't want main menu at all, did I? Let me rename that main game, my fault. Feel free to rename it as well, main game. That's what this scene is going to be. I'm going to do the same here with our background. I'm going to change its graphic to perhaps a shade of yellow. That's far too yellow for this time of day. I'll pick a fairly nice olive green kind of colour. Something like that. So currently we've got our menu for our game, which is purple, and our main game, which is green, just to show you that there's obviously a difference there. When we click on our menu, we want this load button to take us to the main screen, main game. So in order to do that, double click on the object, which may still be open in your workspace, but I tend to just double click it when I need it. So the object obj_play button, and the event we want is when we left click it, something should happen. We should go to another level. So we're going to add an event, which is a mouse-based event because we're clicking. When we press on the left mouse button, so left pressed, we now need to get over here in our workspace, and you can, the easiest way to do that is press on your middle mouse and just pan around by clicking on your middle mouse, and that's the way I tend to move around my workspace. So when we press the left button, what do we want to do? Even if you don't know the code or the options for the thing that you want, you know it has something to do with rooms. So if I type room, you'll see I've got some options here. I've got go to a room or go to the next room in our list. I want to go to a room, and then we want to choose the name of the room we want to go to. We're starting on our menu, we're going to our main game. So let's choose from the drop down in our rooms folder. Main game is what we want to pick. As always, we test everything at every stage. We've done one thing. Does that one thing work? When I click the play button, does it take me to my main game? This will work if the colour changes. So if I play the game now, there's our loading button. If I click our loading button, it takes us to our other beautiful but rather basic looking scene. You'll notice as well that when I press the play button, it loads our main menu first, no matter what. That's because of this little home icon here. No matter the order that our rooms are in, it will always load the one with a home next to it first. That's the first scene to load. We can click on the little home icon though, and we can change the order in the way things load. Maybe in your game you've got a tutorial that appears before the main menu, or maybe you want there to be a little cutscene or a video that plays before your main menu, so you can just move the order around if you wanted to. So I do want the menu to happen first, followed by the main game. What I would also like to have in my game is something that when a timer counts down, we move to another scene. Or just some way of moving to our win screen or our lose screen, for example. So if I right click on rooms, I'm going to create a new room. And this is going to again be our win screen. So I'm just going to call this win. To make this stand out again, I'm going to choose the background and pick a different colour for our win screen. Makes sense to me that if we've won our game, it should be a nice, I think a nice blue, something like that. What I'm also going to do here is make use of more sprites so we can have a message appear on this screen saying, well done, you've won the game. So we're going to create a new sprite. This sprite, obviously right click and choose sprite from the options. Before, we've used import to import a sprite, which is exactly what we do when we drag and drop into the sprite space. But now we're going to edit an image and make a new picture entirely. So we're going to edit an image. Then you get this kind of simple Photoshop type thing, or like Paint, with our tools on the right hand side to draw using a pencil or an eraser, or you've got the rectangular marquee that lets you select things, or the option to type text. I'm going to choose the text tool, And whenever you've got this checker background, like this, a checkerboard, that doesn't mean display a checkerboard. It means this is see-through. This is transparent. So what I'm going to do here is just write the word win. Notice how very small that is, and notice how low the resolution is. It's barely readable. And that's because it's only 64 by 64 pixels in size. It's absolutely tiny. So what I think we need to do here is to change the properties of this sprite. So if I just close sprite 11 down, and what you can see here is the size 64 by 64 is just far too small. I'm going to change that by clicking on the option next to it, the little icon there, the resize the sprite. I don't want 64 by 64. I would like to change it. And do you remember that word I mentioned earlier, aspect ratio? There's a button here saying, do we want to maintain the aspect ratio? And that's ticked by default. What this means is I were to change the width, and then I click, the height will change as well. It will stay the same, it will maintain the aspect ratio. But I want this to be like a rectangle, a wide rectangle. So I don't want aspect ratio to be maintained here. I would like a width of maybe 500 pixels, and I'm going to keep a height of 100. If I apply those changes, what you'll see is my win text is now badly stretched, but we're going to replace it. We're going to do it better anyway. I'm going to edit the image just like we did before, and I don't want this win anymore. It looks horrible, looks terrible. So what we're going to do is use our rubber tool, our eraser tool, and we're going to rub that out. That would take forever if I just did it like so, but you can change the size of the eraser. Just looking at how to do that, you've got the brush size up here. I'm going to change it so it's a much bigger brush so I can rub out what we had before. Back to where we were, text tool, we can choose the colour we want our text to be, knowing we've kind of got this bluish greenish background. I'm going to choose black to be my colour, so I'm choosing the black colour swatch. I'm going to click here and I'm going to put you have won. And I can, once that's placed, we can move it using the rectangular select tool. So yes, I'll make those changes. Use the rectangular select tool to select that text and you can move it. I still think it's a little too small though. If you're used to Photoshop, this feels quite clunky, because once you've written text, you can't change it. You have to delete it and replace it. But you'll notice Photoshop is installed in the classrooms of C8 and C9. So if you'd rather make a picture in Photoshop and then import that as a sprite, just like we did here for those familiar with Photoshop, that's how easy it can be. So I'm just going to select that text again and delete it, add some new text, but this time think what we can do with our properties up here. We've got the type of font, which we can change if we wanted to. We've got the style, and we've also got the size. So I'm going to make it twice as big, size 20. That's a bit bigger. I can see with the rectangle, this kind of cursor. Maybe I want 35. That's quite a lot bigger. So I'm going to put the same message. You have won. Remember, I'm now in this old English text because I chose that font instead. I can select the text as long as I don't click off, and I can change the font if I wanted to change it, but I kind of like that. Okay, so there's our sprite that we're now going to put onto our windscreen. I'm going to close that down. I'm going to close that sprite as well. And remember, whenever we wanted a sprite on screen, we also perhaps want an object to go with it. Before we do that though, let's go back to our windscreen, which has currently got this greeny, bluey background. And I am going to show you that you can just drag a sprite onto our scene. Let me click back on instances first. Oh no, I did want background. Okay, so with the background selected, you can just drag the sprites straight on, but you'll see that that's completely replaced our background color, which we can again change if we want to. But I think our text is overriding it. So what is actually better to do here, if I undo that, just like we did before, make an object and I'm going to call this object obj title that uses that sprite we just made. And then in our windscreen, we can drag our title in on the instances layer, which is up there. And now you can put it wherever you like. You've got complete control over it. And if you edit the sprite, it will edit what it says. Remember, you can still resize it, but remember, you'll stretch the text, so do be careful of stretching it. So what we've currently got is our main menu. That is always the thing that will load. That's our home page. Remember, just like in your websites, you have a home page, the home place it goes to. We have the ability to go to our main game by pressing this load button. Takes us to our main game, and then we need some way of going to our windscreen. I'd originally planned on doing a timer, but maybe there might be an easier way just to quickly demonstrate this. Just going to quickly make a simple object. And I'm thinking the easiest way to just quickly demonstrate something here. I think we will just quickly make a simple person to be our character. Last week on the Moodle page we made our adventure game and we used the sprite in this sprite folder, which it just so happens I've already got from last week. So I'm just going to go into that sprites folder, going to view it so I can see what we're looking at, and I'm just going to grab this character to be in our game again. So I can put Game Maker over there, I can put that over there, and I can grab our character and drag them into the sprites folder. We've got our character. Our character is looking very gruff, and that's going to do for our game. Just like before, every sprite should have an object to go with it. So I'm going to create a new object, and this is going to be called obj underscore player. And all player is going to do in this simple example is when we key press the right key, they're going to move right. So remember, just like last week, we set a direction, which is right, and we also need to set a speed. So set speed, which I'm going to set to a speed of 5. All I'm now going to say is have another object, maybe a coin, and when you touch the coin, you've won the game. That's all I'm going to do in this really basic game. Back in my sprites folder, I've got a coin, or maybe the chest. I think the chest is more interesting. Drag the chest into the sprites, and we're just going to make an object, create an object, obj underscore chest, which uses the chest sprite. Easy as that. What I now want to say is when our player has a collision with the chest, something happens. And I just zoomed up in the workspace, or you can double click on your player object. It'll do exactly the same thing. Our player currently doesn't have a sprite, so let's give it one. Let's choose that looking knight character. And we're also now going to say when an event happens, when we collide with the chest object, this is why naming things is so useful. When the player collides with the chest, we're going to change our scene, just like we did before when we clicked on it. So I'm going to look for everything to do with rooms, go to a room, and the room we want to go to is our win zone. So now what we expect, I press play, it'll load our menu. That's what we see. I press the load button, we should go to our game. That's what we see, but we haven't yet put our character or our chest in that room. So back to our main game. I'm going to make sure instances is selected. I want to put the player in our game, and I want to put the chest in our game, somewhere that the player could go and touch it. We press the load button, we move to the right, we touch it, and we've won our game. It took us straight to our win screen. So with that in mind, you've got the tutorial from last week where we created our adventure game for everyone who was in. Can you now go and fill your game with the same properties and content we did before? Make the character able to move up, down, left and right. Stop when you tell them to stop. Collect coins like we did last week. And now have it when you press the chest, you go to your win screen and you've won the game. In future tutorials, I show you how to introduce lose systems. Maybe there's a timer, maybe there's an enemy that you touch. And actually, let's do that while we're here. Why not? If you're still here, let's do this really quickly because it would take 2 seconds. I'm going to make it so our bat is now an enemy in our game. Just drag that in. It's a bat sprite. And I'm going to do the same to create a new object, which is going to be called obj_enemy, which uses the bat sprite. And all I'm going to say here now is when the player touches the bat, it's game over. Let's go to a you have lost screen. So you can create a room, which could be called lose. I will just keep this black, but you could put some text on there. You could say you've lost, entirely up to you. And in our main game, we're now going to have an annoying bat in the way. And if we touch the bat, we should go to the death screen, perhaps. Remember, you can move objects around by clicking on them and moving them around. I will just quickly make it so my player can move up, because that's not too complicated. So when we key press the up key, we're going to move up at a speed of 5, or whatever speed you want. So now in our game, the player can either go right to win the game or up to lose the game, just as a quick demonstration. Obviously your games are going to be better than this. So if I go this way, I should win. You've won. If I go up, I should get a black screen signifying that I've lost. Oh. What did I do wrong there? So I pressed up and nothing happened. What did I forget to do? When I press up, oh, I put a speed of 0 rather than a speed of 5. My mistake, and that's why we test. Okay. This is really why we test, because I forgot to tell it to touch the bat. So let's add that in. When we collide with our bat object, object enemy, we're going to go to a different room, and that will obviously be our lose room. And this is why we test every single step of the way. Never trust it, always assume it can break. We've gone to our black screen, which signifies we've lost. Your job is to take all the tools from last week, make an interesting adventure experience in that space, and make it so your game is winnable and losable. Thank you very much, everybody.